All right. Is that better? Audio was garbled. I was speaking in tongues. Just kidding. This was. Um, uh, good morning. You can hear me. All right. Good. Well, why don't we continue? We're going to be looking at Psalm 126. I'm going to go ahead and read it. The Psalm of Ascent. When the Lord restored the fortunes of Zion, we were like those who dream. When our mouth was filled with laughter and our tongue with shouts of joy, and they said among the nations, the Lord has done great things for them. The Lord has done great things for us. We are glad. Restore our fortunes, O Lord, like streams in the Negev. Those who sow in tears shall reap with shouts of joy. He who goes out weeping, bearing the seed for sowing, shall come home with shouts of joy, bringing his sheaves with him. A couple things to note about the psalm. One, it's a psalm of ascent, as we've already mentioned, but it is, as I talked about previously, it's in the psalms of ascent are in these triads, and they generally move in space from far away from Zion to close to the city or in the city of Zion itself. So from out in the distance from Jerusalem all the way to Jerusalem, as the pilgrims are making their way for the various festivals in the life of Israel. This is one that would have been out in the outer parts, if you will. But it should be noted that here in verse 1, there's already a focus on Zion. In previous psalms, the first of the triads, oftentimes it was this place of longing and distance. But here there's already a focus or focal point on Zion. In fact, this whole triad in Psalm 126, Psalm 127, and Psalm 128, all three of them focus in on Zion. But they do change in their perspective. So this one is one of longing. Psalm 127 will focus sort of on the nature of the building up of the city or the house of God, and God's provision for his people and blessing on them. And then Psalm 128 is really reflection of the blessedness of the Lord in that city, if you will. God says, somewhat good morning. He is in recovery mode from surgery. Volume is low. All right, let me see if I can get any more out of it. I'm not sure I can. Let me try one more thing. Is this any better, or is it garbled? It's a little better. Let me know, Dave. You guys can hear me okay? Okay, we'll leave it there. So the focus is on Zion in terms of where the eyes are fixed in this psalm. And particularly the fortunes of Zion, the blessings from the Lord for the city of God. And this psalm can be broken into two parts. Verses 1 to 3 is looking backwards at a time when the Lord had dealt bountifully with his people, had delivered them from some situation, and had provided joy after a moment of deep sorrow or sadness. And then in verses 4 to 6, it's a prayer. It's a looking forward to the fact that the Lord will do this again. So whatever situation they're currently in is causing them deep sorrow or sadness. So verses 1 to 3 is looking back. Verses 4 to 6 is that prayer forward. I want to notice a few things about the looking back. First, and I don't know if I can do it. I'm going to try something here. This is going to be new. I'm going to bring up the text, presuming you guys can see that. And I want to highlight a few things in the text that might be, just more visually we can look at it together. Notice here it says we were like those who dream. We were like those who dream. What's that? What's that referring to? Well, I think it's this moment. It's referring to the time when the Lord restored their fortunes. It was like a dream. Another way to put it is it was like we were dreaming. Our mouths were overwrought with joy. We were laughing. We were shouting for joy. The nations were saying the Lord has done great things. The Lord had done great things for us, and we were glad. It was like a dream. We can all look back and consider times in our life when whether the Lord delivered us from something, whether he dealt bountifully with us and gave us something, we were just enjoying fellowship, we were enjoying the blessings of God in our families, whatever it is, we can think back on times where we're overwhelmed with just the goodness of God and his blessing towards us, but oftentimes it feels like a dream because of where we are now. I'm reflecting on this week as we grieve, as we mourn over the shooting in Nashville. Fellow pastor in my denomination, right, in our denomination, lost his daughter. Others lost their spouses and their children. And it can feel like a dream, that feeling of joy and laughter. It can feel like something distant long ago. But I really appreciate what one of the commentators had to say about it. He said, it might seem like a sigh here. When the Lord restored the fortunes of Zion, we were like those who dream, or it was like we were dreaming. Alas, life is not that way. But the commentator said, don't think of it like a sigh. It's not like a sigh. It's like a wonder. It's like looking back on the miracles of God and the greatness of God. And maybe it was the moment that you came to faith. Maybe it was the moment that you put to death some sin. Maybe it was the moment that God blessed you in some way. And it's a wondrous thing to think back on those things and say, yes, God does those things, and those are tastes of what he will do. And that's the implication of this psalm, that they were glad, they rejoiced, they had laughter, and they have hope that this was the thing that would be restored to them. But the psalm does shift. It turns to a prayer, because where they are now is not like that. Restore our fortunes, O Lord. Like streams in the Negev. This little line here refers to southern Israel, a portion of the more arid part of the land of Israel, in the Negev desert. And in these arid desert lands, of course, they have what are called wadis, these dry riverbeds, these dry stream beds that would only fill up when great rains would come. Otherwise, there would be no life. It would be like death. Someone said once, I don't know if it's true. I think I saw it maybe on one of those nature shows, is that out in California, in the high deserts, that, of course, I've only been there once, and it was like a I don't know. I understand why they call Death Valley, because it just looks like, how could anything ever live out here? That's how it felt. I mean, even driving through it, I felt like, man, I hope we don't break down. This isn't a good space. But I've heard that when, in particular part of the rainy season, maybe now, when the rains come, that there is this super bloom of flowers that just springs forth in the desert. And that's the image here, like streams in the desert.
bring forth the bloom, the harvest, like that immediate blast of God's precious deliverance and providence. And there is this immediacy to this. Those who sow in tears shall reap with joy. This is the hope, right? So he prays, and this is the hope that the psalmist has, knowing who he is, that he is one who does this. He says, those who sow in tears shall reap with shouts of joy. There's almost this quick turn. God abundantly fills the desert with life, like streams in the Negev. This is how the Lord works. And he doesn't do it in a little way, but he overwhelms the desert. It becomes a living place. Those who sow in tears shall reap with joy. This is that hope. And it's all guaranteed by the sovereign hand of God, the Lord, the covenant one who is faithful to his covenants. But there is another parallel here that is not immediate. The streams in the Negev come over, in an instant when the rains flood in and the tears turn to joy in an instant. This is, you might call, a divine perspective on time. But the human perspective on time is found in this section. And it says, he who goes out with weeping, bearing the seed for sowing. We just recently, I don't know, let me pull this away for a second. I don't know if you can see this right here. That's a grow light. We're trying to grow seeds down here. Now, we don't know what we're doing, but we're trying, and we're late already in the game. I think you're supposed to start sometime in February. But one thing I can say is that I didn't wake up this morning and see the seedlings starting to sprout up. It still looks like dirt. And there's going to be a time of waiting for the germination and for the seedlings to sprout up, and then there's going to be months of growth, and then transplanting and putting them, and much of it's going to die off, and we're going to probably lose half the seeds. It's toil, and even now as we wrestle with the wickedness of the world, in light of the tragedy in Nashville, there isn't a quick fix. There's weeping, there's sorrow, there's lack of joy, there is grief, and it's long. I can't even imagine being those families. But we all know grief in various ways, in various forms, and it can be long. But there is hope. He who goes out weeping, bearing the seed of sowing, shall come home with shouts of joy. There will be a harvest. That's a guarantee. Despite the time and experience that we have in this place, even as we await the day of our salvation and look forward to glory, there is this hope. Shall come home with shouts of joy. We've had a foretaste of it, right? We can look back and we can say, it was like a dream. I remember when the Lord plucked me by his grace and saved me, and I rejoiced with a joy that was inexpressible and full of glory, and yet I still weep now. But I know with all certainty that he will bring us home, and there will be shouts of joy. Even as we grieve today, even as we look forward with hope, and as we look back at the hand of the Lord and his faithfulness, we cry out, "O Lord, come quickly. Restore our fortunes." Only you can do this, because you're the faithful King. that's all I have for us. It's been a hard week. Text too blurry. Oh, sorry, Jane. Well, it's a bunch of scribbles anyway. Um, so maybe next time I'll try to figure another approach. But I hope it was an encouragement to you, a reminder of the steadfast love of God that never ceases despite the circumstances we find ourselves in. As the Apostle Paul says, it doesn't compare to the eternal weight of glory yet to be revealed. This is a temporary affliction. The world we live in and all of its mess and brokenness. It's temporary affliction. And yet it's real and it lasts and it's painful. But it is not the last say. It is not the last thing. Well, if you have any other thoughts, go ahead and throw them into the chat. We have one to cling to. The Lord, who right? If we were to just to walk away, leave an abandoned um, building, it would eventually be taken over by growth. Yeah, I think there's symbolism there, right? The Lord's at work, growing. Yes, the thorns and thistles too, part of the curse of the fall, but that is interesting. Something tries to grow on every inch of the cursed ground. That's right. All right. Well, yeah. Yep. And I feel like we come back to this theme a lot in the Psalms, and I think it's because it's the theme of our hearts, and it's the theme of the psalmist's heart. But thank God for the hope that is in him. Hope that's in him. All right. Well, I hope you have a good rest of your day. Go out and sow. Even in sorrow, the Lord restores the fortunes in the negative. All right. Lord bless.